Now that we've discussed rubato, let's move on to Chopin's innovations in the area of harmony. Chopin was a wonderful harmonist. He worked with a large palette of chords and used them masterfully to bring out the expressive nuances of his melodic ideas. Of course, a good composer will always do this, but we see Chopin's genius, I think, in two areas of harmony in which he moved beyond all but the greatest composers of his century. One was his sense of harmonic surprise. At certain moments, often at a point of great dramatic tension, Chopin will turn in an unexpected harmonic direction. A simple instance of this comes in the central minor key episode of the D-flat major prelude. Listen. We expect these harmonies to resolve something like this. By digressing instead to here, Chopin changes the entire complexion of the phrase, making it much more interesting and evocative. That example involves an imaginative harmonic substitution, but one not so strange that Mozart, for instance, couldn't have written it. Sometimes Chopin's harmonies leave the realm of known musical practice as even his most daring predecessors and contemporaries understood it. Consider this passage from the Barcarolle. Strange, isn't it? Without getting into a technical analysis, we can observe first that Chopin permits himself a high level of dissonant notes, those that don't ordinarily harmonize with the chords they sound against. First, let's listen to the dissonances. Now in context of the musical phrase. Secondly, the whole passage seems to be searching for harmonic resolution. Chopin delays this audaciously, tantalizing the ear in the process. And when the resolution finally does arrive, it's not where we expected. Here's another instance from the Fantasy in F minor. In this case, Chopin doesn't use dissonances, but the sequence of chords is startling. Nothing in these passages could be anticipated. Everything is unusual and unexpected. As you listen to Chopin's music, listen for such moments of harmonic surprise. They offer special pleasure, and they are one of the traits that make Chopin's compositions so original. Even more innovative than his occasional turn to an unexpected chord or sequence are those passages where Chopin seems to dissolve the very idea of harmony altogether. Such moments usually involve a kind of suspension of harmonic movement, often with the left hand repeating a single note or chord against capricious movements of the right hand. The result is usually a kind of harmonic haze, a blurring of distinct harmonic outlines comparable to the blurring of the music's pulse brought on by the combination of different rhythmic figures. Here's an example of this harmonic blurring from the Nocturne Opus 55, number 2. the rhythmic and harmonic freedom Chopin brought to his music often produces an impression of improvisation. We know from many contemporary accounts that Chopin improvised at the piano brilliantly, and no doubt many of his works had their genesis in his extemporaneous playing. But composing is not the same as writing out improvisation. In composing, Chopin held himself to strict artistic standards. Some idea of his creative process is conveyed in this memoir by George Sand. He found ideas without looking for them, without foreseeing them. They came to his piano, sudden, complete, sublime, or sang in his head as he was taking a walk. But then began a labor more heartbreaking than I had ever seen. This was a series of efforts to grasp again certain details of the theme he had heard. What he had conceived as a whole he analyzed intently in putting it down on paper, and his regret at not recapturing it whole, as it seemed to him, threw him into a kind of despair. He shut himself in his room for whole days, weeping, pacing about, breaking his pens, altering a measure 100 times, and starting over the next day scrupulously with a desperate perseverance. He would spend 6 weeks on a single page, only to return and write it again in exactly the form in which he had first sketched it. What a remarkable portrait of the romantic composer at work! How different from Bach, Vivaldi, Haydn, or Mozart, all of whom wrote music in a workmanlike fashion simply because their employers and circumstances expected rapid production on tight deadlines.